Everybody. As Bernie said, I wear many hats. So when I'm working, I'm a professor of law at Hong Kong U, where I teach about minority rights. I teach about the Hong Kong legal system. And so, in a way, this seminar today puts together all of my interests in one space, right? I can talk about the Hong Kong legal system because we're at a juncture where we're considering democratic reform. And we are gathered in this room today, all of us, because we have a shared interest in our own minority status as Hong Kong people and Hong Kong residents who should be concerned with democracy, right? So today I'm wearing a different hat, one in which I feel honored to be able to share this common space with you as a member of the ethnic minority community in Hong Kong. Like many of you, I too have had experiences where I felt like I am in the minority, right? There are different ways in which things happen to us on a day-to-day basis, and we come away feeling as though we were treated differently. But it isn't always because people intend to treat us differently. Sometimes it's because we let people treat us differently. We let it happen to us. And that's why I want to focus today on why democracy is relevant to us as minorities. And I want to echo some of the points that Audrey shared with you about democracy and the function of democracy. But I want to link it back to the question of why democracy is about us as much as it is about a political system where the majority tend to be seen as more powerful. Democracy is a crucial tool to empower people in a society in order to ensure that there is just government. It is an outlet through which you and I and everyone else can express our demands, our grievances, and bring people who are in power to account. So as Audrey said, if someone doesn't deliver on election promises, you can withhold your vote in the next term and say, I'm not going to re-elect you, because every vote counts. Usually, democracy is viewed in terms of the rulers who are in power and their relationship to people like us who are the subject of the rule. However, there is another very important dimension to democracy, and that is the relationship between the masses as well. So the relationship between the majority and the minority is also important to consider in democratic practice. Sometimes there's a danger, even in a democratic setting, where some very powerful elitist people wield the most influence and pursue their own interests at the expense of other people in the community. And this happens in societies the world over. Hong Kong is not unique, right? Wealth is always invariably concentrated in the 1%, right? So 99% of the world's wealth is concentrated in 1% of the world's population, whereas 99% of us are sharing and distributing the rest of the resources amongst the rest of us. So it is here that the role of an informed and participatory public is indispensable. The common man, that's you and me, we cannot be so distracted by our day-to-day pursuits, whether we're studying, whether we're working, or pursuing some other hobbies, holidaying. We cannot be so distracted that we fail to influence the political process. And that is one matter in which Hong Kong's ethnic minorities have been adjudged by many people to be apathetic. We've been labeled disinterested. We've been labeled as uncaring about policies because we don't think they concern us. Or we've been labeled powerless because we're such a tiny minority that we can't hope to make any difference at all. And what I'd like to achieve by the end of today, after everyone has had a chance to speak to you, is a sense of empowerment. I want you all to walk away knowing that that is not true. You are not disinterested, you are not powerless, and you matter. You matter as much to the Hong Kong community as any other person who is local born, ethnic Chinese, or in any other way contributing to society, because you are fully functioning and contributing members of the Hong Kong community. And we are the ones who make society work, make it diverse, we enrich it with our values and our contributions. So let's not write ourselves off just yet. To secure more and more of society's resources in a manner that is relevant to us, we need to avail of every opportunity to engage in political processes and discussions to make sure that there's a rational dialogue about us, about our interests, for us. Okay, we have to be the ones who make our voice heard, rather than have other people tell us what we want, what we need, and what we stand for. Democracy is typically touted as majority rule due to the decision-making process where we just bunch up a number of votes and then declare a particular policy or a person as the victor because they have the majority in numbers. However, a democracy is not just the will of the people as expressed through the majority. A mature and good democratic society is one which acknowledges and protects the rights of individuals against the tyranny of the majority. So each individual has a charter of rights which they can hold up and say, all of these rights I am entitled to, regardless of what the majority decides, because these are guaranteed to me under my democratic system. So those rights and interests cannot be traversed, even if that's what the majority decide, because that decision would be unconstitutional. That decision is against democratic system or rule, all right? And that would be a dictatorship of the majority because it oppresses minorities. So a notion that is central to effective functioning of a democratic society, and I say effective functioning because, as Audrey said, there are many examples of societies that practice democracy but haven't quite achieved a status of equality across different groups. A notion that is central to the effective functioning of a democratic society is one which accounts for and pays attention to the needs of minorities within the community. And equally importantly, one which makes room for genuine political participation for all people across the board, regardless of their minority status, their social status, their wealth. It doesn't matter. The true measure of good governance is the ability to deliver progress and development in a society by realizing people's human rights, and this requires transparency, accountability, participation, and responsiveness to the needs of people who are poor, who are marginalized, who are underrepresented minorities, people like you and me. So good governance ensures that if a society is making progress, everybody moves along upwards with that progress, that nobody is left behind, top to bottom. So the basic premise is that every person in every group has rights and is relevant to the decision-making process because these decisions impact us. They impact you and me, they impact our children, our community, as individuals and as a group. So in order for government to be just, we must be concerned with government. We must participate in government. The decisions that impact our lives in different ways require us to take interest, and this is the fundamental basis for participation in a democratic polity. If we want to participate then as minorities or as members of the Hong Kong community, there are some key questions that I want you all to consider together with me, and I'm still working my way through this, so likewise for you, you'll be thinking about these questions in the days and the months to come as people approach you and ask you, what's your view on universal suffrage? What's your view on the composition of the election committee or the nomination committee? What kind of representatives do you think are going to represent your interests in these bodies when Hong Kong does, hopefully, give us the right of one man, one vote? Okay, so the first question that's important for you to consider is, who is a minority? There are some people who ask me why we use this label, ethnic minority. I'm not a minority, I'm a person. And somehow when you call me a minority, I feel smaller. Why do we have to label ourselves in this way? Okay, so who is a minority? Typically, minorities are people who are identified by a certain characteristic that puts them in a position where their experience of life differs from that of the rest of society. Okay, because those other traits are perhaps more common. Some of those differences stem from our abilities. Some of those differences stem from our ethnicity or racial background, and generally make us atypical compared to others in the community. Depending on which society you're in, a minority could be women, it could be men, members of the elderly, persons with disabilities, able-bodied persons, racial or religious minorities, or even sexual minorities. In Hong Kong, because we comprise just 6.4% of the population, we are a numerical minority, all right? As ethnic minorities then, we also have further minorities within our own groups. So for example, you may have an ethnic minority woman with a disability, all right? So she's not only a minority by virtue of her status as a woman, but also as an ethnic minority woman who has a particular difficulty. Why is it important to recognize minority status? It alerts people to the different needs of different minority groups. So for example, for the ethnic minority woman who has a disability, her needs in terms of health, education, employment would be considerably different compared to an able-bodied ethnic minority male. The woman would be marginalized if she tried to seek a job, perhaps on the basis of her gender, her disability, and her ethnicity. Whereas the man who may be seeking employment in the market may face discrimination on grounds of their ethnicity, and then indirectly, perhaps he doesn't have the skills to speak Cantonese to the required level. So minority status helps capture instantly some of the ways in which you need to be accommodated so that you can function effectively in society. People need to consider your needs, your capacity, so that they can make room for you to be integrated and be included in the different aspects of life, whether it's work, whether it's education, or just community life in general.